Hey guys, it's Bailey. Welcome back to the channel. This is going to be a quick review, or as quick as it can be given the number of products I'm going to talk about here, but it's going to be a review of the new Real Techniques Bold Metal Brushes collection. I feel like this is long overdue. I've been using them in tutorials and talking about them, but I just needed some time to use them. I think collectively I've been using them for 2.5, almost 3 weeks now. So I'm going to go through them as quickly as I can. Let's get started with the face brushes. So first, I guess I want to preface this whole thing with a little primer on the Bold Metals collection. This is about 2 to 3 times the price point of the original Real Techniques collection, of which I have quite a few brushes from. This made a huge splash in the makeup world when they came out, and they continue to be a success, I think, because they're so well made. Sam and Nick, Pixiwoo here on YouTube, I think everyone knows that at this point because they're amazing. But they came out with this brush line a few years ago, and they're so well made. I don't think I have yet to have a brush that sheds. They're very easy to clean. They're very soft. They perform really well for as affordable as they are. So these are kind of a cult favorite, I feel like. And then they came out with these that visually are amazing looking, but then you look at the price tag and, you know, one of these face brushes is $23 to $25, whereas one of these face brushes is $7 to $8. So this isn't necessarily a brush that you're going to go out and see while you're at Ulta and kind of pick up on a whim. It makes it to where you want to do a little bit more research, find out if it's really worth it, because it's about 2 to 3 times more per brush. Something else I want to point out, just as kind of a random thought, is when I first picked these brushes up, I thought, how are they going to differ from the set that is less expensive? Because these are such amazing brushes. These are going to have to do something to blow you out of the water. And I'm happy to say, before having talked about any of them, that they really came out with some new interesting brushes that are not only different from their original line, but different from any other brush that I've seen. So just before we get into it, that's something that I've really been impressed with overall with this line. The other thing I want to mention about this collection as a whole is that while the original brush line was very light, still felt very sturdy and well made by comparison, you can tell that these not only have more heft to them, so they do feel like a more luxurious brush line, but they're also weighted towards the end of the brush here. So I personally don't have a preference here. I definitely think the additional weight, like I said, makes it feel more luxurious, but in terms of having it, you know, weighted towards the front versus uniform and overall light, it didn't really make a difference to me either way, but I did think it was something worth mentioning because it is a noticeable difference between this brush line and the other. So now let's actually get into it. Let's start with the face brushes. The Gold collection contains 2 brushes. These is actually called the base collection, I suppose. The first is a triangle foundation brush and the other is an arched powder brush. You can see it's significantly fluffier. First, I want to talk about the triangle foundation because it is so unique. You can see here, if you kind of look down, the bristles or the ferrule of the brush, it's like this obtuse triangle sort of. So you have kind of a broader flat edge here that operates very similar to a normal flat foundation brush, and then you have these other shorter sides over here that you can use to kind of get in around your nose, just trickier areas on your face, around your hairline, things like that. I personally, to start off, am a little biased because I don't like those flat foundation brushes. I find it's harder to blend my foundation in. It's more prone to streaks that way. It just takes me overall more time to blend and buff it in. However, it is a great brush if your main concern really is dotting your I's, crossing your T's, and getting in all of those precise points around your face. I think that's the strength of the brush. The bristles here, just like their original collection, are synthetic, so they aren't going to soak up a lot of liquid foundation if that's your preferred medium, and it will make them a little bit easier to wash. But personally, these are so smooth and they lack the natural or the coarseness of that natural hair can sometimes have, that I find it makes my foundation prone to streakiness when I use this to apply. So overall, this is not my favorite brush from the collection. However, like I said, that's coming from someone who is admittedly biased. I don't prefer these kinds of, in fact, I really prefer the buffing brush that she came out with in her initial core collection, or I forget what this is called. My handle, writing on my handle has since worn off because I've used it so much, but this is the kind of buffing brush I prefer to use. So those are my thoughts on the 101 brush. Now onto the 100 brush. This is sort of like a typical powder brush to me. The bristles are very soft. It's nice and densely packed. You can see here all angles there isn't a bald spot to be seen, and the bristles themselves feel a little bit coarser on the end, so they do pick up a nice amount of powder. Let me tell you, if you go into a pigmented blush with this this sucker, you will get more than you bargain for. But it can be used for blush. I've used it for blush. In fact, I use it to apply the blush that I'm wearing today. I've also, I think in a tutorial, used it for bronzer, so you can do it both ways. I personally find, however, that this is fantastic for setting powder as well. It's definitely not as precise as something like the foundation brushes. This triangle foundation brush, oh my gosh, words much. The triangle foundation brush, or at least a fluffier version of it so you can get in your under eye area, but it still does the job at really nicely applying that powder there, or maybe in your T-zone, wherever you may want to apply powder and not need any sort of precision. While the affordable or even mid-range brush lines, because that's really what we're getting into now, they definitely have brushes similar to this, but one thing I think is most notable about this brush in particular is its flatness. You don't get a lot of excess poof here on the end. It's easy to turn it on its side and really kind of pounce it on your skin without having to worry about, say you're up here and it gets in your brows and stuff like that. It's not really round. That is one unique aspect of it. It's not my least favorite brush in this line, but it's not one that I am gonna tell you that you have to absolutely go out and purchase because it's super unique, but it is a nice brush. Now onto these silver brushes, which are the eye brushes and the 200 series as far as numbering goes. The first one I want to start off with is an oval shadow brush and is very self-explanatory. Just to give you a size reference, here is the, once again, the lettering is completely worn off of this. I think this is an all over, it's kind of their iconic shadow brush. I'll annotate it here because I can't tell you what it is right now, but just for a size reference, since I feel like everyone knows this one, this is considerably bigger. It's a little bit thicker, but most notably it doesn't have the tapered tip up here, which mine's kind of wonky and off to the side, but ideally this would have somewhat of a tapered tip, which made it great for getting into the inner corner as well as patting shadow all over the eye. This is really a home run for patting the shadow on the eye as well as blending it out throughout the crease. If you just want a very basic, you know, one color on the lid and then blend it up into the crease, this is amazing for that. However, it does lack the ability to really get in that inner corner and do any kind of neat lower lash line work. That being said though, what it lacks in precision on the eyes, it kind of makes up for it what it can also do around the face. I also like it to apply highlight precisely. I like to use it as a contour, specifically on my nose. It's a little small to start getting in your cheeks, but I suppose if you want to apply really intense contour and blend it out precisely out here, it'd be good for that as well. So essentially it's taking up what and concealer as well, because I love this, once again, Deluxe Crease brush. Almost worn off. I love that. It's also good for concealer as well. So while it doesn't completely align with the brush in the original collection, it is a great multitasker. Next up is the 201, or the pointed crease brush. I'm not even gonna try to hide how in love I am with it. It's super unique to me because obviously it has kind of this pointed tip here, but it's very dense and it tapers down into this circular brush you can see here. I think this is great, not only for obviously getting into your crease, this point allows you to lay color down precisely in the crease, and then the shape of the brush kind of naturally allows you to diffuse it throughout the crease. Like the brush does all the work for you in that way. Same goes for the lower lash line. Because you have that tapered tip, you can really get a nice precise line down there, and yet if you press a little harder, angle a little differently, the rounded shape will help you do some of the work. This is another one that can multitask really, really nicely for concealer because it has that tip. It can get right in that inner corner, as well as shadow because it is so dense. It's great at picking up powder shadow and laying on that pigmentation. Once again, great for the inner corner as well as all over the lid in general. And then because of that shape, you can just go right up into your crease and it's like instant smoky eye. This I would say is an absolute must-have, and I'm actually really glad I found it because I only found a similar brush very recently in a limited edition set from Sonia Kashuk. This is nameless and it was limited edition anyway, but these are nearly identical. I would say the Real Techniques is more dense. The bristles themselves are so much softer than the Sonia Kashuk, and the brush overall is heavier, so it just feels a little bit more luxurious, I would say. Plus, you can't get this anymore, so like I said, really happy to find this one from Real Techniques. Last up for the eyes is the 202, or the angled liner brush, and it's pretty standard for an angled liner brush. I would say the one majorly differentiating factor is that it is very petite for an angled liner brush. As a means of comparison, this is kind of the first one I reached for. It is from Made You Look by Lex, actually, another YouTuber's brush line here. And you can see it's a pretty big difference. And I would say Made You Look by Lexus is a little bit larger, or the bristles are a little bit longer than the average angled liner, but more or less the size is what you'd find elsewhere. And so you can see this is definitely made for serious precision lines, which I think is nice, because I know when I was first starting out, and even today, I still have this problem today, liner brushes this size are sometimes a little cumbersome to use, whether I'm wanting to smudge my upper lash line or do a precise line on my upper lash line. The length of the bristles, as well as the size or the width here, just makes it a little cumbersome to get around your eye area. And so I do appreciate that. Oh, and the other thing is brows. It's also really great for creating more hair-like, smaller, you have a little bit more control of the size and shape of the lines you create for your brows. So it definitely gives you a little bit more control of the lines you make. I'm not personally a huge angled liner brush user to begin with, but if you are, I do think this is a great one to check out, because it just gives you that much more control. And last are the rose gold, and in what my opinion are the prettiest brushes. This is the 300 series, or the finishing series, I guess is what they've deemed these. And in here you have the number 300, or the tapered blush brush. This, I have to say, is very similar to a lot of tapered blush brushes, namely Elf's blush brush, which is just so happens to be tapered as well. This used to be my jam, like years ago. I would use this all the time. It was in favorites videos, and slowly it fell by the wayside as I tried new brushes, but this reminded me exactly of it. And sure enough, I mean, short of the actual appearance of them, the weight, like I said, these bristles are a little more densely packed, so you really can layer on that pigment, and the bristles are definitely softer. These are a little bit more coarse. Beyond that though, these shapes are nearly identical, and I have had the e.l.f., which I think is $3 for this brush, for years, obviously, and it's still held its shape well, it's still fully functional. So this is a beautiful brush. It definitely serves its purpose as a blush brush, but I really like the e.l.f. as well, and I would probably recommend that over the $15 brush. And last is the 301, or the flat contour brush. This is another one that I'm absolutely in love with because it is so unique. It fills that special hole in my makeup brush set that just no other brush had before. Obviously, it looks like a brush with a buzz cut, so it serves some purpose that no other brush could. Basically, this is my jam for contour. It fits perfectly into the hollows of my cheekbones. I apply a straight line down, and then I slowly go in and blend it out. It also fits really nicely into my temple. Unlike a lot of brushes I've used before, this one, because it is so narrow, you can really skirt in between or around your eyebrow without actually hitting the hairs up here, because nothing's more frustrating than looking in the mirror in the middle of the day and seeing that there's product in my hairline. It's just personal pet peeve. I'm sure it's a lot of other people's pet peeves, but it comes from having a brush that is just too big. So this kind of solves that problem. It not only gets in your temple, your hollows, but it's also great for your nose as well, naturally. Conversely, it's also great for highlight. I mean, it's narrow enough to apply to the tops of your cheekbones, the bridge of your nose. It kind of serves two purposes there. The only other brush I found just for the sake of comparison in the original line is the Expert Face Brush. This I more so use for foundation. However, I did use it for contour, but what I found with this is that it can be a little bit too round and wide in some places. So, it's kind of eking in there at the temples, and then it is definitely harder to get a precise contour here on the nose. So just as a means of comparison, I did want to show you that because it was something that I drew a natural comparison to, but really I think that this is the brush to get the contour job done. So in conclusion, the brushes that I would absolutely recommend are the flat brush that I just mentioned, as well as this pointed crease brush here. The brushes that I thought were definitely nice and worth checking out are the 200, so the shadow brush, and then the angled liner brush if you really love a good angled liner. And then the brushes that were just okay for me, or I found I preferred others more, because let's be honest, there's not a bad brush in the bunch here. There was no shedding, all of these actually performed and functioned beautifully. It's just whether or not you could find a brush that accomplished something similar that wasn't $25. So, and that would have to be the 300, the tapered blush brush here, this powder brush, and then the triangle foundation. This, however, I hopefully explained that it's just because I really don't like to use these kinds of foundation brushes, so maybe you will. Overall though, there were definitely some winners from this collection, so I hope this video helped you guys. And always remember that these brushes might be more expensive than the original collection, but they are still Real Techniques. You still can use those Ulta coupons, and because it's not a prestige brand, technically not considered a prestige brand in Ulta, you'll find more of those 20% off coupons more frequently than you will for the prestige brands, and they will go on sale. The brand as a whole will go on sale more frequently. So just something to keep in mind if you've seen a brush here that you are absolutely in love with and are thinking there's no way it's going to happen because they are a little bit more expensive. Beyond that though, like I said, hope you found this video useful. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!